Dante Exum was once considered one of the most anticipated prospects in the entire world. He had a lot going for him. He was a taller point guard with exceptional basketball IQ and a feel for the game that most players can't even comprehend. You combine his natural talent with his length and explosiveness, Dante Exum had all the makings of a superstar. In fact, people even compared him to the likes of Penny Hardaway. Exum was starring in Foot Locker commercials at the age of 17 and signed a massive endorsement deal with Adidas before he even got drafted. Oh, the entire world knew this was a superstar in the making. Sadly, in the bulk of his early years, Exum had a rough time, to say the least. With a major knee injury along with several other issues, his career never gained traction. When he did play, even his own coaches accused him of being lazy, and that if he didn't take the game seriously, he'll find himself out of the league sooner than people realize. In a summer league game when he recorded 6 turnovers, his summer league coach ripped him apart. "I told him he has to play every possession. He doesn't have the luxury of being the 3rd or 4th option and standing in the corner. In the second half, he can't get tired that easily." This was back in 2017, and it was at this point where it became quite clear that Exum was not going to be the player we all thought he would be. Among other things, he admitted he had a hard time adjusting to the NBA. From the rigorous schedule to his own decision-making and lack of motivation, he fell into a cycle of bad habits that set the foundation for his demise. The 2014 NBA draft class was widely considered to be one of the deepest classes of the decade. From top to bottom, there were a plethora of highly talented players, a huge pool of talent deep into the draft, not seen from most other classes. From Joel Embiid at number 3 to Clint Capella at number 25 to Nikola Jokic at number 41, there was no shortage of talent from this class. Over time, this draft became known as a historic class, but also one where there were a couple of busts near the top. Jabari Parker was the most prominent example, and he became irrelevant very quickly. Then there was Dante Exum. Drafted by the Utah Jazz, the team recently moved on from the Paul Millsap, Al Jefferson era, and Exum joined a team that was the 2nd youngest in the entire league. With an average age of 23.4 years old, only slightly older than the Philadelphia 76ers. That was during their trust the process years. The Jazz were basically having their own little version of trusting the process. I do believe joining the 2nd youngest team in the NBA did not create a good environment for Exum to develop, especially on such a volatile roster. On that team, you have so many young guys fighting for touches, players coming off the bench just to jack up shots, cause they know their time is limited. They had 3 other guards shooting way more shots than Exum did: Trey Burke, Alec Burks, and Rodney Hood. And they weren't exactly unselfish players either. They were 22, 23 years old and trying to get paid. The 19-year-old Exum played all 82 games in his rookie season, averaging over 22 minutes a game, but his usage rate was abysmal. At 13.8%, the 3rd lowest on his entire team. That's not good for his development. The 3 guards I mentioned earlier, all of them had around 20% usage or higher. People simply look at Dante's numbers and think he had the worst rookie season in history for a top 5 draft pick. I mean, seriously, his numbers at a glance look putrid. However, that brushes past all the context. This was a horrific situation to get drafted to. The Jazz plan was to basically play all of their young players and see how they do, picking and choosing which ones to keep and which ones to trade away. The problem was, a lot of these young players did not buy in and only wanted to get their own. And that's why, despite winning 38 games this year, which wasn't bad at all, they averaged the 2nd fewest assists per game in the entire league. They had guys who just did not want to pass the ball. It bred some resentment with Exum, but it wasn't just him who was frustrated. A young Rudy Gobert also got fed up too with not getting enough touches. As a result, Exum's production suffered, and most of it was mental. Soon, he found himself lacking the drive and motivation to wake up and keep playing. Keep in mind, he was the most prominent prospect from Australia in a long time. An entire country was watching him, because he was the hometown kid who made it big. Unfortunately, game after game, struggle after struggle, Exum was not improving much. In fact, he regressed as the season moved along. The physical and mental fatigue was taking a toll on him. It got to the point where he admitted, "I know it's going to happen. I know I'm going to get tired. All the coaches know it too. It's just a matter of doing the right thing so I don't hit that wall." Coach Quinn Snyder, however, did not believe Exum's problems were related to fatigue. In response to his statement, he claimed, "He's just got to keep working. Everybody's fatigued. If you hit the wall, you get up, you go around it. He needs to keep playing. That will help him get better." Sadly, what comes next would ultimately change his career forever. Almost immediately after the NBA season ended, Exum headed back to Australia to play for the national team. You know, not everyone wants to play basketball the entire year, but he's young and he needs something to get his confidence back after a bad rookie season. Then, the worst thing that could have happened, happened. It wasn't just the torn ACL that sent shockwaves across Australia. It was this excerpt from ESPN's news report that was really concerning. Exum was driving into the paint and came to a jump stop in the middle of the lane when his left knee buckled. He was untouched, but went down as he lifted for the shot. From the report, it seems like he was going in for a routine drive to the paint, jump stopped with nobody around him, and tore his ACL as he jumped up for a shot. We didn't see exactly what happened, but from the way it got described, it eerily reminded me of how Derrick Rose got injured. This is concerning. Exum literally just turned 20 years old a month before this injury. There's no way he should have enough wear and tear on his body to tear his ACL after landing from a normal jump, with no contact. Over his rookie year, he mentioned numerous times about the physical fatigue he's experienced. Maybe it's due to his bad diet. Perhaps his body is simply not built to handle it. This was the first sign that Exum could potentially be injury-prone, but we'll have to wait and see. Dante Exum missed his entire sophomore season recovering from a torn ACL. During this time, he worked really hard to come back. He owed it to himself. He felt like he underachieved in his rookie season and the critics started doubting him, so he desperately wanted to prove them wrong. Most importantly, after a year-long absence, Exum came back to a team that was steadily improving. The Jazz now had a defined identity as a team, with Gordon Hayward leading the way, the emergence of Gobert, and surrounded by quality veterans, the Jazz surprisingly won 51 games. Exum was slowly improving. I mean, he still wasn't that good and barely played in the playoffs, but there were some good signs. He showed flashes of explosiveness, the speed and quickness that made him such a highly touted prospect to begin with. His decision-making and passes were on point, displaying his superb basketball IQ and methodical approach. He was praised for that growing up. Exum was no longer the worst player in the NBA. That's a step forward. With that being said, he still only averaged like 6 points a game, and he watched from the sidelines as the Jazz reached the second round of the playoffs for the first time in 7 years. I'm not saying 6 points a game on 43% shooting, I'm not saying it's impressive, but it was progress. It didn't look like the injury impacted his speed or quickness at all. He fully, completely recovered. Then there was another setback.
Steals the ball, attempts the layup. TJ1 jumps to block the shot, but lands on Exum. Both players injured on the play. Exum, dislocated shoulder, would not return.
In a preseason game, Dante Exum went up for a layup, and in comes TJ Warren flying into the scene out of nowhere. He rammed into Exum's shoulder, and the collision resulted in a separated shoulder, which required surgery. It was projected he'd miss the entire season, though he did come back near the end, and even had some good playoff games. In particular, the Jazz put him on James Harden to moderate success. His perimeter defense gave the Jazz a noticeable boost that they were missing. Despite this moderate success, Exum missing almost the entire season is not what you wanted to see. 4 seasons in, and the Jazz started to get impatient. The shoulder injury, it was just a freak accident, and I feel for him. On the bright side, he performed well enough in the playoffs to make the Jazz think, okay, let's give him another chance. The front office was hesitant on keeping him, especially now since it looked like Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert would be the future cornerstones of this franchise. Alas, Exum showed just enough for the Jazz to reconsider, so they offered him a 3-year, $33 million extension, which he joyfully signed in the summer of 2018.
Dante Exum, already missed 25 games with an ankle injury this year, is injured again, and this time, it's serious. An MRI revealed Dante has a partially torn patellar tendon in his right knee. He's out indefinitely.
The injuries did not stop. Exum suffered several different injuries in the 2018-19 season, which culminated with a torn patellar tendon in his right knee towards the end of that season, facing another long recovery and rehab, and now his $33 million contract was dead weight. Over the next several years, he got traded multiple times, and barely played on the teams he got traded to. In every trade, he was basically used as a salary dump. The seasons were short. Exum was working his way back from injury and did not get much run. When he did play, he barely looked like an NBA player at this point. By late 2021, he got waived. This time, no team picked him up. Seeing his NBA career fading away by the second, Exum still did not come to terms with it. Usually, players who get waived, they take a break for a while, and maybe try to come back a few months later or a year later. But not for Exum. Almost immediately, he started his comeback journey. He first looked towards Europe, and quickly made his way to FC Barcelona, and then Serbia. He would play in the EuroLeague for 2 years. During this time, Exum matured a lot. Initially, his intention of playing in Europe was to get recognized, and leverage his time there to find his way back to the NBA. He felt a sense of urgency because his NBA career slipped away from him. Over time, however, he realized he can't keep thinking this way. My first year in Barcelona, I think everything was about coming back to the NBA. And then when I signed in Serbia, I took on that leadership role to a point where everything was about that. That was my focus. It wasn't about the NBA or anything anymore. I was just playing basketball. I was enjoying having the time of my life, just enjoying good quality basketball and focusing on what I can control. Dante Exum was offered a 2-year, $6 million contract by the Dallas Mavericks. This was it. After 2 years of playing in the EuroLeague, Exum is finally back. You would think he'd breathe a sigh of relief that he's back, but now the pressure is higher than it's ever been before. This is his last chance to prove he belongs in this league. At 28 years old, smack dab in the middle of his prime, if he fails now, if the slightest thing goes wrong, his NBA career would be over for good. Exum answered the call. Those 2 years in Europe paid off, and he's having the best season of his career. With career highs in shooting efficiency across the board, Exum is playing at a level that we all believed he could play at. He impacts the game in multiple facets. His ability to score from all areas of the floor, and his intelligent, controlled playmaking. It seems like he's finally living up to his potential. The scoring definitely surprised some folks though. He looks like a completely different player now compared to when he was in Utah. Back then, it always seemed like he was unsure, hesitant, and would overthink way too much. Now, you can tell his confidence has skyrocketed. Exum said when he was in Europe, he learned how to play within a system that he wasn't used to, a playstyle that forced every player to learn how to read the offense and play to the strengths of their teammates. This made him think about the game in a whole different light. He picked up things he never learned when he was younger. Remember, Exum never played college basketball, not in the US, not in Australia either. He credits his own growth and maturity over the years, as he developed the leadership skills he never had back in Utah. Dante was always a huge junk food guy. There's a reason he suffered through so much fatigue early on. He had a hard time staying in good physical condition until he fixed his diet. Very few players get a second chance at an NBA life, and while Exum was mostly ruined by injuries out of his control, he made the most of it by working on things he can control. However, I don't even think anyone cared when the Mavs signed him. It was overlooked because everyone assumed he was washed, and he wasn't gonna make much of an impact at all. So it's a pleasant surprise to see his hard work paid off. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Where do you see Exum's career headed from here? Did you actually think he'd make the impact he's making? It surprised me too. I thought when the Mavs signed him, it was a shot in the dark, and that he'd be stuck at the end of the bench like usual. The amount of growth we see from him, it's highly impressive. He's a completely different guy. Anyway, let me know in the comments your thoughts, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.